songs was, "When Jewish blood sprays from our knives, things go twice as well." And that was Crystal Night. It was from then on in that the Kindertransport started.
I didn't need money. I needed people who'd take the children.
I cried, you know, I sort of let it go. And one of the helpers who was on the journey said, "Don't do that, you set the young ones off."
My parents taught me a sentence in English, which was, "I'm hungry, may I have a piece of bread?"
And I remember I cried and cried because I wanted to come back here, but then I never saw them again after that.
We entered the train in our hometown as children and left the train as adults, because from here on we were responsible for our own lives for the rest of our lives. All of us have seen generals standing on pedestals, high pedestals, and all you ever see is the top of their boots and the bottom of their swords. I wanted nothing of that. We decided that we would go for a low-level pedestal so that people can relate, empathize. I slept through the actual night and got up in the morning to go to school. And as I walked onto the street, there was glass all over the street, there were crowds on the street. And I realized that something very sensational had happened. And I began to slowly realize that Jewish shops had been vandalized. There were Nazis standing around in uniform, and big smears all over the wall saying "Jude verrecke," you know, die Jews and so forth. Jews couldn't go to restaurants, Jews couldn't go to cafes. There were many restrictions. Many shops said entrance to Jews forbidden, no dogs and no Jews, stuff like that. There were Nazis marching. Well, who were the Nazis? They were the shopkeepers of Danzig with fat bellies, parading in brown uniforms, marching through the town. One of the songs was, "When Jewish blood sprays from our knives, things go twice as well." And that was Crystal Night. It was from then on in that the Kindertransport started.
Once the government said that as long as I could find somebody to look after these children and would guarantee to look after them during the crisis, they would be happy to give them papers to allow them in. It was possible. The thing was through newspapers, through friends, through going with their help to other societies. It was a lot of work, yes. It was a great deal of work. I didn't need money. I needed people who'd take the children. A mass of people at Liverpool Street Station. We had all the people who had sponsored to take a child coming to the station, and our problem was to get the right child to the right family, and what to do with those that were left over because something went wrong or they missed a train or something. It was fraught with difficulties.
most emotional thing I can remember was when we had to go to the railway station, and it was at night as well, because I don't think they wanted the population to know what they were doing, what was happening. Of course, all these parents and children, it was very hard. I mean, I remember my my father telling me that you will like it in England because you'll be able to ride the horses and things like that. Oh dear, the reality wasn't like that at all.
We always talk about the past when we're together, don't we?
I know. I still remember you wringing that chicken's neck.
Really? How old was I then? Gosh,
You
it's
were,
even worse.
You were little.
I think I remember being with Gertie because she was older, and I think I was just with her. But I do remember the train stopping and people coming in and giving us a sweet drink, and then we carried on.
I cried, you know, I sort of let it go. And one of the helpers who was on the journey with it said, "Don't do that, you set the young ones off."
When I arrived at Liverpool Street, one of my uncles came to meet us because he was already in England. And he then took us to spend the night in London. And the following day, we went to the first foster home in Hinckley in Leicestershire.
Eve was given a bath, and she wouldn't let them take her until I was in the bathroom with her. But after that, I think they put her to bed.
I remember being at that place, and I remember it being strange. And I remember the life there, you know, because he was a Unitarian minister, I remember going to church and Sunday school. And I remember the wife. I don't remember much about him. I remember she was quite strict. I don't think I stayed there that long. It probably wasn't more than a year or so, and then I moved to Cambridge. Oh yes, I remember it. I remember the long drive. I moved to a very nice family. They had a son about the same age as I was. A beautiful house and a big dog. But then my other uncle, this uncle here, who'd been a rabbi in Moravia, was concerned that I wasn't having any Jewish education at all. I think she had to go into hospital to have an operation, and so I went to another family in Cambridge. And I remember I cried and cried because I wanted to come back here, but then I never saw them again after that. She wasn't such a nice woman. She was quite strict as well, and towards the end, I think she'd have liked me to be a pair of hands, you know, to do housework. My uncle then became a teacher. He wasn't a rabbi then anymore, and they had one child by then, and they decided I should go for a holiday and see how I liked it. I'm always emotional at this point. And I had a lovely holiday there. And my aunt said to me, you know, you're going back now. But when you come back, it'll be forever.
I mean, I don't remember a night when I didn't cry. I was homesick from age 12 till goodness knows when. It was a feeling you carried about with you. And I think the whole atmosphere, I mean, they saved my life, of course, but it wasn't a house for children. And really, in a way, I was the maid, you know. I always remember talking to these little wood things that crawled along when I was polishing the floor. I sort of made friends with them. I can't ever remember being hugged, you know. I mean, you'd think, if a child came to you to live with you, you'd greet it properly and give it a hug, and because we couldn't talk together either, which I suppose was a hindrance. I went to school then for a couple of years. And then, of course, we come to the time when I left school at 14. And I think on the next Monday I was introduced to my first factory job, where I promptly ran the needle of the sewing machine through my thumb. And I don't think I lasted very long in that factory. I can't say that I gained anything intellectually living with them, because it was a completely different life. You know, you can't really imagine what it was like.
Would you like me to show you one of the books that I was talking about that my father actually left me? That's it. It's the Pentateuch, 5 books of Moses. You can see it's rather worn, and he put a wonderful inscription in it as a reminder of the day that you left your father's house. The Lord protect you in all your ways. To be quite honest, it's almost like a curtain come down and blacked it all out. I landed and found myself in Margate. What happened between my landing and reaching Margate, I cannot remember. I was probably somewhat homesick, probably missing parents, and possibly thinking, oh, it's a great adventure coming to a new country of which I know nothing. I don't know its language, except for one sentence. Interestingly, my parents taught me a sentence in English, which was, I'm hungry, may I have a piece of bread? Well, I was in a hostel already in Tyler's Green. I'm not sure how I learned the language, but we must have done. And then adapting myself to living with a group of 50 youngsters up to the age of about 15, 16, 17 or whatever. And I'm told I was the youngest at that age. Learning to play games with them, you know, sort of learning to be a youngster in a new country and trying to adapt myself. The first I heard about my parents was in 45. We knew the exact place where they went and the exact dates of their death because there was somebody with them from our hometown who somehow recorded the dates, and I have them. My mother and my father died January, my mother in March 42, and I went to speak to that person. Could you tell me a little bit more about what had happened? And that person just clammed up Not another word. All I know is that they were deported to Riga in Lithuania, to Izbika, which was a camp outside. One's imagination can run riot when one reads what happened to the Jews of that area, or who were put there, how they met their end. I let my mind run riot on that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Well, I was good looking when I was young.
You're not bad looking now either.
Well, I did want to know, of course, what had happened to my parents. And I mean, there was my grandmother and my mother's sister and my cousin, who I loved dearly, you know, was like a brother to me. He vanished as well. I just carried on with life as you have to.
And these are my parents. Well, they lived in a village outside of Vienna called Vösendorf, and so they were able to carry on. And this, because it was outside of Vienna, they probably were able to hide my father more easily. And because they hid him, they were ostracized. And so when bombing took place, they weren't allowed to go into the shelter. My mother had been killed during the war, but my father managed to survive, and he came full of hope and to see his only child. And it was quite a traumatic experience because I had more or less just got a new father. But they'd thawed during the stay, and it was quite hard because, you know, it was just a continuation for him, but it was something new for me. And I was all geared to go to Vienna the following year, but unfortunately, I think it was in the February of the year, he had a massive heart attack and died.
Remember Bloom's, the restaurant?
Bloom's,
That was
I worked in Bloom's.
Did you work in Bloom's? I remember being taken by the school to a play in the West End. It was some pantomime, I think. And it was in the middle of the play that I was sitting there with all the other students when I suddenly said to myself, I'm an orphan. I suddenly realized it then. And I understood that the chances of my parents still being alive after what I had heard were minimal. It was just, I suddenly came to the realization it was a fact. You know, kind of face it, boy, you're an orphan.
But a few years back, I was in Israel, in Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Center, and I walked in, and there was a screen showing various things, and one of the screens was showing the events of the 9th of November, 10th of November in Germany. And suddenly there appeared on the screen a group of people in the dress of a concentration camp, the striped uniform, and I nearly jumped out of my skin because I said, there is my father on that photograph. I watched it 2 or 3 times. Yes, it was him, 2 or 3 men in. And when I got back to England, I asked for a copy of that and to get it to my sister. And I said, Ruth, is that our dad? She said, yes, that is our father. An experience, you know, that really hit me home hard. Shocked me, took me back, knocked me back. And it's a feeling I still have whenever I look up at that photograph. Any other suggestion? Yeah? A better place, good. I go out to schools to teach about Kindertransport for a number of reasons. One is that the story of the past is important for the future, And to go out, I need to teach and to talk about it, and not just to let the children read in a book about it, but rather to meet somebody who came through, at least on the Kindertransport, so that they too have a much better understanding.
Would you ever have stayed in Germany?
The answer to that is, for a long time I didn't want to know anything, but I went back to my own hometown. Basically, to see where I came from. I was invited by the town, and I took my son with me, and there's a lovely story about that. And they put us up in a hotel, and we looked down at a spot, and that spot was an open place, which I later found out that day was a place where I stood on Crystal Night as a kid. And I had great pleasure every time I went out of the hotel and walked over that place. I enjoyed walking over it as if to say, see what was done, I've survived, I'm free. It's not just the past and trying to relive the past, it's what the future holds, and what the future holds, particularly with children, for them, and what their part is in that future, that they have a role to play. And I use that, the Kindertransport, to illustrate this. I mean, many of the kinder, many of whom actually emigrated to various places, but in this country many of them have contributed to the state as best as they could.
I'm always pleased when I hear that children, youngsters in schools touch upon the subject, but I think it's, I mean, for me it'll always be there, of course, but how much the children will remember, I don't know. And the way society is these days, they don't really care about anything, not even the present, never mind the past.
I think the world's gone absolutely balmy. We've gone through 100 years of the greatest achievement that man's ever made, technically and in many other ways. And look what a mess we're in. Nothing much to be proud of, is there? We've left the place in a more dangerous situation than it's ever been.
In Liverpool Street Station, there's a McDonald's across, and people come out from McDonald's and they sit on the pedestal. And after some initial consternation, I suddenly realized that this is right, because the people who are sitting there, some become part of the Kindertransport. If somebody would have offered us then a McDonald's, we would have drunk it or eaten it. I mean, the Kinder. And why shouldn't the people now not sit and enjoy a sandwich or a drink on the same platform on which we stand? There is this concept of humanity that binds us all together. If we don't have that, we are lost. And I think that the British government, in allowing 10,000 children to come, although without their families and so on, that was a display of humanity. And I think that in itself was a good act that deserves thanks and commemoration. And you know, it saved people. There's a saying in the Talmud that if you save one life, it is as if you've saved the whole world. And here 10,000 children were saved. That means something.
Begin the commemorations and celebrations of the 75th anniversary of the Kindertransport.
The important message is there about the Kindertransport, of what it means and what it was, and relating it to the background of the Shoah, of the Holocaust.
It'll be remembered, But anybody else, I don't know.
A lot of people think that we're milking it. You know, there's too much, you know, it should be forgotten. But the thing is, it's not forgotten because it's happening to other communities as well as in other societies.
Because we experienced too much too soon. I think that probably is the epitaph of our youth.
V'shanit bayu, v'shanechanaku.